Hi, Asma. Everybody else. Rachel. 今は、朝の9時ですよね。9 o'clock.
9 o'clock.
Breakfast sake. Hi, Asma. Hey.
I guess everyone's here.
Hi, Sam.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wine Coach, another weekly wine, and in this case, sake tasting. You know, it's a beautiful day here in Toronto, and we're excited that we have fun. We have people from all around the world joining us on this call. Tomita-san from Japan, but we've got some Montreal people. Shout out to Montreal, Quebec. We've got some people from BC joining us, so we're really excited that we got to do this really fun tasting. Shichihonyari is a sake that I first tasted 4 years ago in Japan, and it kind of excited me. It was a sake unlike I'd never had before, and I finally got around to putting it in my restaurant and in my shop, and it's been super exciting. So I asked Mariko, hey Mariko, why can we do a Shichihonyari tasting? As weird as that sounds, and she jumped on it, and here we are. Mariko, thanks for coming. I appreciate your time as always, and your knowledge is going to be great. And I hope you're excited to taste some sake today.
Yes.
Yeah, right. And we have Tomita-san, who is the owner of Shichihonyari. Welcome to our call, and welcome. Thank you for your time. We really appreciate it. It's very early, I imagine, in the morning. So thank you so much. Rico, I guess a good place to start is like, you've just recently brought Shichihonyari into Ontario. What was the driving force behind that? Like, why did you find this sort of, why did you want to do this?
Sorry. Why do we want to bring Shichihonyari? So I got to personally visit Tomita-san at his brewery like several times. I think 2-3 times in the course of probably a year and a half. It just things like lined up where we were in the area and we visited, but also I took like I teach WSET classes sometimes as well, and in the WSET educator courses, they were like, we're going to go to Shichihonyari. So Tomita-san was always super gracious and open, and we got to visit a few times. So, right, Tomita-san, you saw me like quite a bit for a while. 何回もお邪魔した時期がありましたよね。
そうですね。3年前 ?4 年前
3年4年前ですね。So while you were drinking the sake Nick on the bullet train, I was visiting like over and over again. He's like, oh, you again. Got it. We don't work with you, but sure. And you know, it was always super memorable. The brewery is beautiful. Even the bit we can see behind Tomita-san, it's gorgeous, right? And I think right behind your head, 窓のところにステンドグラスがあるんですよね。Yeah. So we can't. It's a little backlit, but that square, that you know window is actually a stained glass piece that shows the Shichihonyari, the seven spear logo. Yeah, so it's just a gorgeous place and so traditional, but also really forward thinking in its certain ways. Yeah, this is the logo of the seven spears. And so yeah, it was always just like memorable, and we finally convinced Tomita-san to let us work with him in Ontario. Yeah, so it's the first time it's been to Ontario, like you said, in the middle of COVID, and we're now just hoping to start introducing it to more and more people.
And Tomita-san, your brewery is one of the oldest in Japan. It's quite a long history of brewing sake. I find that super interesting. A lot of wineries, 50 to 60 years old, and I think you're, close to 500 years old. I think that's a really strange thing for a lot of, I think, modern people to have a history that long. That's pretty awesome.
とても古い蔵
Thank
ですよ
you.
ね。460年以上です。
1530s.
Yeah, 1530s. I mean, Canada was, that's a big statement actually, but like Canada was definitely not a country yet. Yeah, so it's quite mind-boggling.
Hi.
Can you wanna like can you talk a little bit about the brewery and yourself and maybe how you got to this place? Yes.
喋ったらいいですか？
はい、お願いします。
はい。Hello everyone. I'm Tomita from Shichihonyari. I'm president and brewmaster. Please translation. 僕はここの息子として生まれて外で働いてるんですけど、2002年からこの蔵に戻って今お酒作りをしております。今日はお酒作りはもう終わっちゃったんですけども、仕込み蔵からお届けしたいと思います。
So I was born into this brewery, but I worked elsewhere for a bit and then came back in 2002. And, the sake brewing actually has finished for the season. So what are we in June? So all the brewing is done, but he is in the main fermentation room to talk to us today.
今日は、皆さんお時間いただいてありがとうございます。日本酒のことを、ちょっとでも多く、勉強して、日本酒をもっともっと好きになってもらえる時間としたいと思うのでよろしくお願いします。
Thank you for your time today, and I hope that you'll taste more and learn more and be curious and have more opportunities to enjoy it.
今日本酒の蔵はだいぶ減ってしまったんですけど、今日本で、1300軒以上まだ残ってまして、で全部の都道府県に、あります。でうちは滋賀県っていうちょうど日本の真ん中ぐらい、京都っていう町の、隣の県ですね。で、やっておりまして、滋賀県は33県、あります。僕がこの蔵に帰った時は実は68県ありました。それぐらいのペースで日本酒の蔵は今減ってます。
So there's about 1,300 breweries in Japan, and that number has unfortunately decreased quite a bit in the last few years. Shiga Prefecture is where Tomita-san is. It's right next to Kyoto, which I'm sure a lot of people have either been to or know about. And in Shiga, right now, there are 33 breweries. But back in 2002, there was 68 at the time. So that's kind of the speed at which some breweries are choosing to close up. But I think to add my own commentary, the ones that are thriving are the ones that are really strong and they're doing really creative things.
一つ20年、30年前ぐらいは日本酒は大衆酒として飲まれていることが多くて、ちょっとコンセプトに各蔵が乏しい部分があったんですけれども、今最近は若い作り手たちがそれぞれのコンセプトを持って作り始めて、すごく、日本酒いい状態、面白い状態になってきたので、これからはそういったものに共感してくれる飲み手が、増えてきて、もう酒蔵の数も下げ止まりになって、いい形で日本酒が理解されて飲まれる時代が今日本においても来てるかなと思います。
20 to 30 years ago, the sakes that were being made at the time were really for everybody, for the masses, and that had its own philosophy and time. But now it's the younger producers who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, or even like just younger thinking, forward thinking, that are again finding new and creative ways to express themselves and finding consumers and fans that also think like them. So it's a really exciting time for sake brewers right now.
日本酒の原料って本当に水と米だけなんですね。でそういった意味で水もうちも地下水蔵の中の18メートルが汲み上げてるその水だけでもう米洗いの時点からその水だけなんですけれども、本当にその米も水も地域の自然環境を恵み合ってこそのお酒だと思うんですが、一時前まではワインと違って、日本酒米って乾いた穀物だから運搬できるんですね。 移動できるので、ワインは果汁をこうすぐ使わないといけないんで、そんなに長く時間をかけて移動できないと思うんですけれども、日本酒は移動できるから、よその県とかいいって言われる米を引っ張ってきて、自分の県で作るから、せっかくその土地の地酒って言いながらも、その土地を全然表現できてないっていう酒造りが、本当に20年、30年前は多かったです。
There's a phrase called jizake, and sake is for sake and ji is for place. So the smaller brewers, it's maybe craft breweries is the most direct translation. But even when we say craft, a lot of brewers 20, 30 years ago especially would have made sake from maybe the water from their region, but because rice is transportable compared to grapes, where it doesn't last more than a few days at most, you could ship it from anywhere in the country really and make sake with it. So even though it was made in one place, it was really hard to say that this is my terroir, this is where we are. Whereas now people are moving away from that philosophy, but also especially for Tomita-san, if you deconstruct sake, it's rice and water. And the water that they use is well water from 18 meters deep. And I've seen these reservoirs, but they collect this water to do everything from rice washing to the very end. So it's really using what is locally available and like right outside.
で、僕が蔵に帰るまでは、うちの蔵も兵庫県の山田錦とか福井県500万石、有名で良いと言われる米をこう引っ張ってきて、でどちらかというとポリシーなしに酒造りをしてたみたいなところがあったんですけど、僕が前の仕事でワインを売ってたこともあって、でワインのアドバイザーとかの勉強でもしてて、で会社を辞めた後にフランスだとかスペインだとか、あとはウイスキースコットランドのスコッチだとか見にぐるぐるこう世界を回ってる中で、その土地土地でこうローカルの酒を醸すっていう人たちとすごく出会ったんです。特にブルゴーニュ地方は、農家さんでもあり、ブドウを作って、で、そこでワインを作って、そこの地下に寝かすっていうことで、この土地を表現してるんだっていうのを、本当に僕らみたいなこうファミリーサイズのワイナリーの方々が口々に、こう僕ら試飲して回った時に言ってくださって、これをやっぱり日本酒でやらないと、地酒っていう名前を言いながら地酒じゃないなっていうところから、僕は帰って、まず一番初めにやったのが地元の契約農家さんとつながって米を作ってもらうということでした。
Nick, you and I were talking about how like we don't see a lot of Yamada Nishiki in Tomita-san's lineup. I was saying 20, 30 years ago before he came back, they were using a lot of these rice varieties that I think a lot of us know, like Yamada Nishiki from Hyogo, 500 Mangaku from Toyama, the rice varieties that were said to be good, right? But then one of the first things he did was to start working with contract farmers in his region, in his town. And the reason how he got to this thinking is that before coming back home, he was working in the wine industry. I actually didn't know that. So he was working as wine advisor certifications and worked really well, worked with wine. So before coming back, took this little like gap year, I guess, almost, and traveled to Spain and Burgundy and even Scotland to study these regions. And Burgundy really spoke to him that these small, very tiny actually, producers were growers, and they were making wine with it. And that's where he really got that connection from.
これどこまで喋りましょうかね。シーンとかしながらに移っていく。まだもう少し喋った。
ですね。
言ってください。
Do we want him to talk more, Nick? Do we want to start tasting and then have maybe just if you could talk about the general kind of not philosophy, but what your goal is with your sakes? Would that make sense, Nick? I think. Like,
yeah,
stylistically. Yeah, like what kind of sakes do you wish to make? The time and place. 味わいとしてのそのスタイル、お酒のスタイルについて少し。
はい、そうですね。で、先ほど申したように、やっぱ米が原料、米しかないっていうことは、僕はどちらかというと、原料由来の雰囲気っていうのをお酒に持たしたいなというふうに思っていて、当時、日本酒って、酵母由来の、この香り、フルーティーな、もう日本酒の香りって、もう変な話ですけど、酵母でもう、大体決まっちゃうんですね。香り系の酵母を使うと、どうかもしても大体香りが出ると。 で、その香りのお酒が流行ってた時代で、こうフルーティーで飲みやすいねっていう時代だったんですけど、僕はどちらかというと、食中っていうことを軸に置いてたんで、あまりそういう香りが高すぎるのっていうのは、じゃあお料理と実際どうなんだろうっていうと、やっぱり少し香りが邪魔をしたり、料理を引き立てきれなかったりっていうことがあったんで、米感っていうことを軸に置いてスタートしました。
The core of what he's doing is really rice, right? So 20 years ago, it was a time when brewers were realizing and really kind of having maybe a heyday with yeast, where if you choose different yeast varieties, you could create a lot of aromatics, and some of it was probably definitely like artificial or a little manipulated, and so that's not the direction that he ever took. And we spoke earlier about how Shiga people said were always people who didn't chase the trend. So it was like, this is what we're going to do. So it's all about the rice and showing the expression of the rice and what it's capable of doing, rather than the aromas you can derive from using different yeasts. So.
Yeah, I would agree that that's kind of what I get, definitely. Very rice-centric sake.
お米の味がすごく伝わるお酒ですね。
そうですね。それがやっぱりお米っていろんなお料理と、特に日本でいうとご飯ってどんなおかずでも結構対応できるというか、食べれるじゃないですか。やっぱお米感があるっていうのはやっぱ食中酒として幅広くこう受け止めれるかなと思ったんで、フルーティーな香りよりも米の味が前面に出やすいような、どっちかというとオーソドックスな酵母を使ったりだとかっていうことで、米もこうブレンドせずにうちは使うんですね。よく麹は山田錦、かけ米はそのローカルななんか酒米だったりっていうことが多いんですけど、うちはもう 100% 単一品種で作るっていう、やっぱその米の特性だからこの味っていうことを伝える。だからそれもやっぱ米に軸を置いてるからこそ、米で話ができるようにブレンドして、ブレンドしていいお酒もちろんできることもあるんですけども、うちはこの品種のこととかをこう話したかったりするんで、ブレンドせずにやってますね。
So some some sake is made with two different rice varieties, or more. But the koji rice can be one rice, and then the kake rice can be another rice. But Tomita-san's goal is to really show show each single variety of rice so that we can see what they taste like. So today we're having 3 different rice varieties. But there's another one where you can really see the expression or the possibility of each rice variety. So rice is like so important. A bowl of rice will go with anything, right? It supported civilizations for hundreds of years, that you can have rice and anything really. That's the concept with the sake as well. The flavor of the rice can go with a lot of things, including like more modern foods that we have in Japan, like whether you're using olive oil or cheese or charcuterie, as well as soy sauce and miso and these more traditional flavors. So orthodox or more traditional yeast, not the really fragrant yeast varieties, is definitely the way to go for this brewery.
ですね。だからお米の品種も滋賀県の品種しか使ってないんで、地元での米を使うってことは、地元で栽培特性のある品種だけになるんで、この有名な品種っていうよりも、もともとローカルで栽培されてた品種のみっていうふうになります。
So all the rice varieties they use are from Shiga, and they work closely with the farmers to use their rice. Yeah, so they know what's being put into it, how it's being farmed, and it doesn't have a long ways to travel as well. It's not about the branded rice varieties that we talk about a lot. 抵抗あります。
Yes.
例えばお父様からとかお客様から、昔作ってたお酒、山田錦だったり500ミリだったり、どうしたんだっていう抵抗はありました。
そうですね。多分というか、実際のところ飲んでる人もちょっとのんぽりで飲んでたっていうか、別に七本槍の純米って、だからその先の米のこととかも考えて飲んでたマーケットをうちが持ってなかったんで、そういった意味での抵抗はなく、逆にそういう教育っていうか、飲み手ごとうちのこの新しいコンセプトにこう巻き込んで作っていったっていうか、それが20年前です。
I was wondering if there was any pushback of anyone saying, "Hey, what happened to this rice?" or like, "What happened to this sake?" And he said the people who were drinking their sakes weren't really that like thinking that hard about what they were drinking. So by making sakes that had a bigger policy or philosophy, they gained customers, but they didn't really lose people because the people who didn't care didn't care. Yeah.
でもまあそれ日本酒全体に言えることで、そこまでやっぱこだわって飲んでた人がいなかったんですね。そこでやっぱ赤ワインブームだとか焼酎ブームっていうところで、今まで日本酒って飲まれたものが本当に急激に減って、そこで若い作り手たちが一年発起というか自分たちのコンセプトを作り出したんで、本当ここ20年以降、ものすごく日本酒がそういった意味で面白くなってるし、今まで日本酒、飲食店行ってもメニューが日本酒1号みたいな、そういう、銘柄とか書いてない時代も、まあ今でもそういうお店ありますけど、もう今じゃもう何々県の何っていうので、お客さんもそれを考えて飲み分けするいい時代がここ数年来てる。日本ですらそういう状況というか、日本酒においては。はい。
Not really asking, not knowing why they were drinking it is kind of the sake industry as a whole. I said 20 years ago, where a menu would say Nihonshu sake, one ichigo, so one cup. I didn't say what it was or where it's from. Like some restaurants are still like that, certainly, but it's really in the last 20 years. Well, at that point, like in the early 2000s, late 90s, I think people were really not drinking sake. So there was this time for wine and shochu and like everything else to be really kind of getting big because there wasn't people really like what's the word, like they weren't committed to drinking sake. There was no real reason for them. So then that's when these brewers like Tomita-san and his friends, your gang of sake brewers, really started to, I think, change the way things were done. 皆さん仲いいですよね。富田さんも、大西さんとか。
そうですね。
お父さん。
もう、はい。もうしょっちゅう横のつながりで情報交換して、蔵見学行って全部教えてもらってっていう。結局もうみんなで業界盛り上げていかないといけないなっていう。親の世代の時はもう隣の蔵のことはわからないみたいな時代だったんですけども、今みんな県をまたいで一緒に頑張ってるんで、これから良くなる。楽しみにしててください。はい。
In their parents' era, brewers didn't know what the next brewery over, like next door, was doing. But now these brewers who are friends, they'll go visit each other's brewery. They'll tell them, how they do everything. It's not a secret, and so they share ideas and exchange information. So it's almost like your unofficial, informal Toji guild, where you teach each other what you're up to. Yeah, it's a pretty great group of friends and community you have. Yeah. Should we taste some sake? Yeah.
Sake number 1 is the Wataribane.
Yeah.
Number 6. I like this sake. We have this in the shop. I'll put this in the chat if people are curious as the price for all the information. We have some Wataribane fans in the audience, so they're gonna really.
渡り船お待ち大好きな方が結構いる。
おお、はいはい。そう、渡り船お待ちとね、まあニアイコールというか、ニアリーイコールというか、イコールという人も渡り船とお待ちはね、かなり近い。まあ両方在来種って全然掛け合わせてない、本当にこう言ったら野にあったお米。今僕らが食べてるコシヒカリとかそういうお米って全部こう掛け合わせて何回も掛け合わせてやっといいのが一個できる。山の錦も掛け合わせてるんですけど、でもこの渡り船はこう在来もうその土地にあったものです。
So wataribune rice is very closely connected to omachi rice. We'll probably talk a little bit more about exactly what it is, but wataribune and omachi are varieties that have not been blended, like haven't been crossed. Sorry, cross is the word I'm looking for. So whether it's Yamada Nishiki rice or even like koshihikari rice that you eat at home or elsewhere, they would be crossed with different varieties. But wataribune and omachi haven't been touched. So it's very ancestral or like heirloom variety, where so you get a lot of energy and character from this rice. Yeah, it's one of my favorites. But I was looking at Wataribune number 2 and number 6 and getting very confused.
2号は背が低い、6号は背が高い。で、もともとは同じ渡り船なんですけど、 この例えばタンポポでも、背の低いタンポポと背の長いタンポポとか、この在来のものって、人間も背が高い人間とか低い人間とかいっぱいいるように、こう混在してるんです。その中から背の低い方ばっかりをこう集めて、それを培養っていうか、継いでいったのが渡り船2号。で、高いやつばっかりをこう、取って植えていったのが渡り船6号っていうことなんで、では同じ在来なんですけども、そこがちょっと選抜したって感じですね。
So this is specifically Wataribune number 6, and this is a different strain of Wataribune than Wataribune number 2, which is commonly called Tankan, like short strain. So he was saying, like, if you look at dandelions in the wild, you have short dandelions and tall dandelions, or short people, tall people. And so in the wild, in nature, we have this variation, and the short ones that were chosen and cultivated over the years became Wataribe number 2, and then the tall ones Wataribe number 6. And Omachi is quite tall. Like I saw a picture with Wataribe number, so Tankan Wataribune, then Yamada Nishiki, then Yamada Bo. Yamada Bo was very, very long, right? And then this Wataribune is actually quite short in comparison. Okay. But can you tell Wataribune って名前の由来を少し説明してもらえます？
これね、諸説あって、諸説はいっぱい、もう昔のことすぎて、明治の話なんであれですけど、もともとなんか、福岡の方の人が、なんか米をこう、滋賀県の方に、昔なんか持ってくるとき、なんか船で来ようとして、で、その船で、持ってきたときになんかお米を暗闇でひっくり返してなんか落としてしまって、どの米が何かわからなくなったけど、まあこの米は渡り船って言っとけみたいなことになったみたいなのがあるんですけど、多分物語なんで、ちょっともうわからないですけど、古すぎてっていうもうなんかもう神話の世界じゃないけども、まあ明治のことですけど、はい。
Yeah, so Wataribune is from like the late 1800s, right? I think is the latest, the most recent story. But so the legend goes that from Fukuoka, omachi rice was shipped on boats, and the rice barrels tipped over, and they lost record of what the rice was, so they called it Wataribune, which the characters mean crossing ship. So from Fukuoka to Shiga, but they lost the identity of it, so they called it crossing ship. But Tomita-san saying most likely it's probably like extrapolated, and it's a game of telephone where it might have changed a little bit over the years. But I think the vast amount of stories out there says it's very curious and interesting. Someone should do a documentary, like a Netflix documentary that I would watch and Rachel would watch and Nick you'd watch about the journey of Wataribune. Wataribune のね本当の由来っていうのを誰かがas much as いやドキュメンタリーにしなきゃいけないですね。
そうですね。もうでも本当に何が本当かわからないぐらい古い米なんで。で、さっきの2号と6号の話で言うと、もう雰囲気はかなり近いですね。単価も長価も。で、さっきちょっと説明されてました。2号が山田錦のお父さん。だからこの6号は山田錦のおじさんみたいなもんですね。
Okay. So
お父さんの兄弟。
お父さんの兄弟。So Wataribune number 2 is the father of Yamada Nishiki, right? But Wataribune number 6 is probably like the uncle of Yamada Nishiki. So again, all in the family. But yeah, there's a little bit of like distance there. But why did you choose 6号選んだ理由っていうのは？
滋賀県に6号の種が残ってたんですね。これ、平成13年、多分15年ぐらい前かな、に残ってて、で、ある農業のチームの人たちが、その試験場って、米の研究所みたいなところ、本当に、これぐらい残ってたんですよ。ちょっと。それを、倍々で増やして、渡り船を、少し植えて、そこから自家採取して、で、また増やしてっていうことで増やしていって、お酒が作れるようになったのがその3年後ぐらいで、その時に6号が残ってたからそれでやったっていう。2号ももともと滋賀であったんですけどね。 でこういう復刻栽培を県のみんなでやったっていうお酒です。
I was wondering why number two and not why number six and not number two was chosen, and for why he chose it. And there's like a seed bank basically in Shiga where they had a very small amount, like this much amount of number six, and so the prefecture along with some brewers and farmers brought this back to life, and that's the reason why even number six is so special in Shiga. So can you tell us maybe like what's the goal with it? Not goal, but like what kind of sake is this sake? このお酒にどういうお酒ですか？
はい。で、このせっかく大事なお米じゃないですか、復刻したお酒なんで、じゃあこう削っちゃうよりも、あえてこう削らずに、そのお米の持っているものをお酒にしっかりと表現しようっていうのがこの低精白になった由来となります。で、ちょうど70より小さく削らないと純米って言えなかった法律が変わった後だったんで、70より黒い磨いてなくても純米って言えるようになった時でもあったんで、この渡り船 77% で純米を作りました。一旦そこまでじゃあ。
So this race, Wataribune, is so special and holds a special place that they didn't want to take away by polishing a lot, which is why this is at 77. But it also, I think it was 純米 70% じゃなくていいっていうの2002年とかですよね。
そう、2004年かな？多分4年。
So around like 2004 was when they decided that junmai doesn't have to be polished to below 70%. So he's like, oh, great. Okay, I'm going to do it at 77%, which is, a little extra than 80 and a little more than 70 to really keep the flavor of this rice. Yeah. I find it really...
ごめんなさい。なんでそもそもお米を削るのかっていうと、お米の外側にビタミンとかタンパクとか、脂質、油があって、そういうのはお酒を作ると雑味になるから削ろうっていうことになってまして、で、それを削って真ん中にあるでんぷんだけが欲しいんですね。でんぷんを麹がブドウ糖に変えるんで、周りのものは雑味になる。だから削った方がいいお酒ができるっていう考え方が主流だったんですけれども、ただそうすると味は当然単調になっていくんですね。だから僕のこの考え方としては、やっぱさっき初めに喋ったお米らしさっていうのを出すには、単純なでんぷんのこの粉よりも、米の味わい、食べて美味しいのもそうなんで、人間が食べるときもそんな精米したお米なんてもうペラペラなんで、周りがあってこそなんで、で、周りが渡り船だとか、玉坂米の特性でもあるので、それをあえて残して、今まで雑味と言われてたものを複雑味と捉える。お酒の雑味は複雑味だと。お酒のテクスチャーだと。っていう考えでもって、作ってます。はい。
I'm sure everyone here has seen some diagrams over the years, but the reason why we polish is because we take away the fats and proteins and like vitamins and things that give a lot of complexity is his thinking, but really like why everyone polishes or used to do a lot more is that they wanted to keep they wanted to make it really clean and elegant and pretty. So these flavors were considered like not off flavors, right? Like rough flavors that gave a lot of like other things, and this like other is what actually gives more layers and variation and complexity. And so this is why he chose not to polish very much with this rice. Yeah. And as a whole, I think, you don't find his sakes at 35. Yeah. So I find this all your sakes, but this one like really like elegant and there's a prettiness to it, but there's a lot of like body and richness and acidity. Yeah.
I get a very it drinks very like a very still body of water, like a pond, and it has this like depth and complexity and this finish that is, I think, such a great representation of Junmai sakes, where you're not getting fruit and like that clean elegance in the forefront, or you're getting this super clean finish that I sometimes find with Ginjo sakes. And it's just, there's this finish and there's this texture that I think resonates with a lot of wine drinkers. And what a lot of wine drinkers are looking for now is to have this more textural component rather than just sweetness and fruit and like flavor. And this, for me, typifies that textural element that I love about these sakes.
Texture is like really, yeah, really key. 大丈夫ですか、三田さん。水面がすごくこう、綺麗な水面のように深いけれど、とってもこう静かな感じがするって。
なるほど。
テクスチャーだったり、磨いた吟醸大吟醸だとやっぱりそのフルーティーだったり、こうまた淡白というかきれいなちょっと甘酸っぱい感じのお酒が多い中で、ワインラバーとしてワインプロとしてテクスチャーだったり酸味、複雑味っていうのがすごく好きだって言ってます。
ありがとうございます。すごい嬉しいです。まさにそこを目指して作ってるので、ただ洋食ですね。これはクリームソース系だとか、脂質系、乳系のお料理、例えば、カルボナーラとか、クリームシチューだとか、そういったちょっと本来、さっき言ったその綺麗で甘酸っぱいような日本酒だったら受け止められないような、お料理と合わせてもらったときに、このやっぱ日本酒の、幅広さを感じてもらえるお酒かなと思ってますし、あとは、本当に穀物感、悪く言うとちょっとぬかっぽさみたいなところもあるかもしれないんですけども、お燗にした時も、やっぱそういった要素があるからこそ、横の幅が広がって、味の厚みの構成の要素になってるかなというふうに思います。
Really happy to hear that. That's exactly what he wants. If you're having the whether you're having like cream dairy dishes or a little bit richer foods, it can stand up to that very well. Like grilled meats and what did I have the other day? Anyways, I had this with grilled like skewers, but it had like a Thai curry, yellow curry kind of seasoning or marinade, and it was amazing. And when you warm it, it becomes more like, if you, the flip side is like, it's kind of more like ricey or more grainy. But when you warm it, that becomes part of the like texture and the richness of it. So you're using Zaltos. You trust yourself. I do not, again, but I feel like, wait, Asma's probably using some really fancy glasses. And who else is on this call? モンテリオにいる東っていう日本酒の仕事してる子にワイングラスめちゃくちゃ揃ってるんですよ。
そうなんですか。
Yeah, you have to show a photo later of what you're using because it's probably pretty fancy. Yeah.
I'd also say that, like, from my readings, that like Shiga cuisine is very intense flavors, and I think modern cuisine, especially maybe in Toronto, and like when we talk about international cuisine, we tend to focus on the stronger parts of each country's cuisine. You know, you think about Italy, you think prosciutto, you think Parmesan, you think these big intense flavors, and I think this is the appeal of these sakes, is that it's kind of designed to suit really intense flavors, like lots of heat and flavor and sourness, and it's
cream and lactic.
A very versatile sake for a modern palate, I think.
Yeah. And like Shiga has some amazing food. Sometimes a little bit richer, right? I guess would be a classification. Yeah, it's so close to Kyoto and has a lot of its influence, but it's a very own thing, a very own culture, and there's some more richness. The beef in Shiga, for example, is also very famous, or the sushi there, the original. 名前出てこない。船寿司。船寿司、はい。船寿司, the original sushi, which is like so intensely like fishy, salty, lactic, pickled, it really makes sense. これ何度ぐらいが美味しいですか？
僕は結構ね、最近だとね、もうルームテンプラチュラ飲んだり、15ぐらいとか、あとは少し冷やしといて徐々に上がってくるとか、あとはもう保管するんだったら最近ちょっと高めで、これもちょっと僕が最近おかん自体が55とか高くすることによってC ねですることによってこうカチッとね輪郭がなんかこう締まるんです。ぬるかんだと横幅のゆったりした広がりを なんかこうもう体液に馴染むような感じで楽しむぬる燗と、55ぐらいで上げることによってパシッと、シャープになって味が多いのがまとまったやつをコンと飲む楽しみがあって、これはちょっと最近この高めでクイッと飲む感じの方を楽しんでます。
Current favorite is to heat sake like this sake, for example, up to like 55, which is quite high, right? 55 degrees Celsius for everyone here. So that way it kind of like sharpens up the sake and is like becomes a little more what's the word, like angular in a sense and more structure, and then to drink that like fast kind of you saw the motion. Yeah, whereas if you warm lower, like 35 to 40 to 45 like that, it becomes more like soft and round and a little sweeter. I've had like not like real arguments, but kind of arguments with Stu where I'm like, why is this so lukewarm? Can you warm it hotter? He's like, no, this is the right temperature. So excited to do that again. Yeah.
Customer's always right. The guest is always right.
Yeah.
If the guest wants their sake hotter, warmer, then that's what you do. You don't argue with them.
今はいないんですけど、トロントで栄バーって日本酒バーがあるんですよね。そこのなんかすごく仲いいんですけど、なんかすごいぬる燗にするのが好きな人で、なんでここにぬるいのってなんか喧嘩というか嫌になるんですよ。もっとあげてよっていうことになります。本日思って。
はい、一回ちょっと55度もやってもらってみてください。日本酒ってよくマイナス保管とかよく言われるんですよね。特に最近だとそういうの U クラブも増えてきてるんですけど、もちろんそういうお酒もあるんですけど、例えばうちのお酒がマイナスから出てきてすぐ飲んだら、このお酒のこの低精白だったり、このさっきのテクスチャー複雑味っていうところの良さがキャッチできない、冷やしすぎてると。だから日本酒をもう全てこうもう低温っていうわけじゃなくて、低温に置いといて保管するのは別に悪いことではないんですけども、うちのやつはやっぱ飲むときはもういわゆるワインセラーから出してきたぐらいの、12度とかところで、保管もこのお酒は12度でも大丈夫ですし、そこから出してきてもらった温度からこう上がっていくのを楽しんでいくみたいな、ルームテンパラチャーに上がっていくのを楽しむぐらいが、このお酒に関しては一番この広がりとかキャッチできる温度帯になるのかな。
And there's such a big range or like big space that we can enjoy this sake. So a lot of sakes right now that are trendy are like aged at very low temperatures, like -5, 0 degrees often. But his sakes, when you do that and then bring them up into your glass, it's just like really hard to taste. Whereas you can bring it out of your like wine cellar at 13, 14 degrees and then drink it like that or let it warm up as well. Especially because this one and the next sake we're going to drink, the tamasake, is low polish, right? Which everyone, again, just to review, it means lightly polished. So not very much polishing. So more of the rice is there. Yeah. Next sake? Right. Yeah. Everyone, hey, I don't have a bottle. You guys both have bottles.
You sold me this bottle. So if you don't, that's not my problem. That's not my problem. Hey.
Yeah. You have both. Nice.
What?
I have a question about
the boat. Okay, so the like can you point it out? もう一回させてもらっていいですか? So yeah, that's the boat at the bottom. Yeah.
Like a boat.
The boat and the rice on the boat. So yeah.
Sorry, Nixon.
Yeah.
Oh, the term teisehaku. This is the first time I've ever seen it on a label. It means low polished sake. Is that the correct sort of meaning of the term?
Yeah, teisehaku is low polish or lightly polished, I guess, is Holly, you can switch to gallery view. Like on right, Nick? That's how it works. Yeah, so the top right hand corner, there's like 9 little dots and says view. So you can change that to gallery and then you can see all of us at the same time. So yeah, 低性白. 低 is low, 性 is for polish, I guess. 白 is for white. You don't see that.
I can fix it. Keep talking.
Okay. Teiseihaku means not teiseimai, but teiseihaku でいいですよね。teiseihaku だと is low polish, not polish ratio, if that makes sense. So it's only been lightly cleaned. If you imagine like a bowling ball and you just only like lightly clean it, then it's still gonna have more of it. Is the yeah, I'm not sure if that makes sense, but it does. So yeah, teisei haku is for low polish or lightly polished, sorry, is the better explanation. Which is why this is teisei haku 80% polish ratio. Yeah, that makes sense. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so tamasakae. Okay.
はい。玉坂です。これはさっきのこの法律が変わった次の年に作り出しました。で、玉栄をうち中心で、今でもそうなんですけど、全体の 75% がこの玉栄ってお米使ってるんですね。で、この玉栄でいろいろバリエーション作ってみようということで、その法律が変わった時にすぐ取り組んで、作ったら、もうよく削らないからコストを抑える酒作るんだろうって言われたこともあったんですけども、コストを下げるために削らないと言われたんですけども、でも実際もう削らないからしか出せない味わいのお酒になって、で削らないと発酵中に溶けにくいんですね。っていうことはめちゃめちゃ酒粕ができて、だから実は結果コストの高い酒になったっていう。溶けない。
やっぱり溶けないんですか？
溶けないです。やっぱり玉栄って超硬質米なんでそもそも溶けにくいんですけど、それを削らないと余計に溶けない。
This sake, sorry, the Tamasakae rice makes up 75% of their production, and they made this. They started with this 80% polished, so very very lightly polished sake the year after that the laws changed, so that this is a junmai. But it doesn't have to be polished to 70 and below. And some people, I'm not sure who, I'm going to ask in a second, accused him of doing it at 80% to cut costs or lower costs. And what he's saying now is that's not true at all, because tamasaka is really hard to melt. It's hard to ferment. And so what you get is actually a lot of sakekasu, is the rice that's left unfermented. And you can't make a lot of sake. So it's actually the opposite. By using a very lightly polished rice, he gets this flavor, which is the goal. But you actually can't make a lot, which is what some people misunderstand about it. So yeah, it's a rice that doesn't melt very easily. It's a rice variety that is from the 60s, 1965, around there. のぐらいですよね。1965年ぐらいですか、命名されたのって。
はい。古い。
Yeah, but it's a low percentage of shinpaku, the star chart. So yeah, definitely a different. You get different profile, taste profile. Yeah.
で、硬くないってさっきからお米の話で出てますけど、そこの話だけちょっとしておきますね。で、渡り米はすごく柔らかい米です。水を吸いやすい。で、玉坂はすごく硬い米、吸いにくい。で、例えば 77% のこちらは、だいたい15分ぐらいの吸水時間です。で、80% 玉坂は一晩。もう一晩でも吸い足りないぐらい。それぐらい米の硬さが違います。となると、蒸し上がりの硬さも当然違って、それで蒸し上がりが柔らかいと発酵中に溶ける。溶けるイコール味の多い酒になる。で、溶けないイコールすっきりした酒になる。だからこの吸水具合っていうのを調節することで、目指す資質を設計することができるのが日本酒。
Talking about how rice melts, and just to like really simply sum it up, wataribune rice, the first sake we had, that rice absorbs water very easily, which is why it's easy to melt. Whereas tamasaka doesn't, it doesn't absorb as much water, and they steam differently. But by adjusting the steaming time, or sorry, the soaking times, he can kind of design the result that he wants. But to compare, the wataribune soaks for 15 minutes to get to the like goal of the moisture content, whereas a tamasakae he needs to soak overnight. So it's like a huge difference how they react to the water and the environment. Yeah. But that's a huge part of, like, we talk about fermentation a lot and koji a lot, whereas the soaking and like the washing and steaming kind of gets almost bypassed a little bit, but it's a huge part of the process. I always find this sake, but well, all of your sakes, but in this one in particular, this like saline saltiness, yeah. When you're a little tired or like hungover, maybe I think the sake just really like soaks in nicely. Yeah.
なんで、
はい。
ワインは果汁でもう糖が決まっちゃってるじゃないですか、糖度。だからすごくブドウ作りが大きい。でまあ、よくワインはなんかブドウ8割、人2割みたいなことを言われることが多いと思うんですけど、日本酒に関しては米が取れた後にそれを何%に削るか、麹米とかけ米を比率どうするか、麹菌何使うか、どんだけ水を吸わすかとか、人間のジャッジがものすごく大きいんです。だからこの米だからこういう酒になるっていうのももちろん一つだけしか原料ないからあるんですけども、それ以上に誰がどういうコンセプトで作るかっていうウェイトがものすごく高いのが日本酒になります。
With grapes, you have your potential alcohol, like you've got your sugars already. So it's really, about the farming, like their growers first. It depends on your philosophy too, but your wine makers talk about their wine growers or their farmers, and so the human the winemaking to farming ratio is like 80-20 is the number. But then with sake making, you've got rice, which is farmed, of course, but there's so many decisions the sake maker has to make, from polishing to, like, well, first of all, which rice to use, how to polish it, like which farmer to work with. There are so many steps and decisions that it really is, every step counts, and you can say this rice will make probably this kind of style, is suited for this kind of style, but there's so many other things to consider. So my favorite answer to everything is it depends, right? is for it depends が一番の答えですよね。この米ではどういうお酒が作れるのとか言われると、it depends そのお酒とか人によって全然違うってことがね。
そうなんです。で、去年うちの農家さんのお米を、一昨年か京都松本酒造に送って作ったんですよ。
ありました。
矢倉米で作ってもらったんですけど、でもやっぱり松本の酒になりました、それは。
So he sent one of his farmer's rice to Matsumoto to heat his brewery when he was there, and of course, even though it's their rice from Shiga, from their farmers, he didn't made a very different sake from what Tomita-san would make, right? That would be it's like a rice swap, or I'm sure like beer brewers have done it in winemakers too, but you get very different results. Yeah,
really cool.
This sake too, I think warmed is really nice. Something a little salty, like olives, that sort of thing. Yeah, braised meat. Yeah. 好きなペアリングってあります？このお酒で。
そうですね。僕このお酒はね、実はちょっとスパイシーなものとかブラックペッパーとすごく相性が。で、例えば、お肉もそうですけど、昔めちゃめちゃペアリングで、これアメリカで作ってもらったペアリングだったんですけど、トロのバーナー炙りにブラックペッパーかけたもの。その相性が、そういう合わせ方僕その当時はしたことなくて、そこからこのブラックペッパーがちょっと入ることでこのお酒がすごく引き立つ。この低酸白の部分がそれを引き立ててるなっていうのはすごく感じます。
You had a restaurant or someone in the US do this years ago where they torched some toro, like tuna belly, and then had a little bit of black pepper on it with the sake. Apparently it just went really beautifully. I think the richness of that dish with the pepper, the spice, with the low polish, and this style makes a lot of sense. 美味しそうですね。Nick, you gotta do that.
パストラミとか好きですね。
Do you need a torch? I'm sure you have one.
I have a torch.
You can do that. We should go to like Miku, and I mean, that's what they specialize in. But 炙りっていう会社がこっちにあって、もうお寿司だったり、お魚を最後こうトーチでこう炙るところがあるんですけど、そこで絶対そうですね、やってもらいたい。
浮いてきた油をね、ブラックペッパーでこの日本酒を締めて。
The oil that like that comes out, like that comes to the surface, that with the omega 3s with the pepper.
でこの玉境ってすごく輪郭があるお酒なんですね。パシッとこうちょっと骨格輪郭が感じてもらえると思うんですけども、これがやっぱ油の料理に強いんですよ。日本酒はちょっとあんまり持ち得てない部分で、日本酒どちらかというとそんなにオイリーなものってあまりこううまいペアリングしにくいと思うんですけども、この骨格がオイリーなものをさっとこう流してくれるんで、日本でも焼き鳥屋さんとかがもうめっちゃ相性いい日本酒やっと出会ったみたいなことを言ってくれたりするお酒。
It's surprisingly hard to find sakes that go well with like rich like proteins and fats that come from these proteins. So with the yakitori restaurants in Japan, they always say, okay, finally we have a sake that goes with yakitori. Chicken fat and like I can imagine chicken skin with a little bit of sancho or pepper or something. Yeah, so Tamasakai rice is saying has a lot of shape and structure to it, and that really shows in this sake. Yeah. Okay, so I'm really excited about the kokoku, the two kokoku, 2 vintages.
18、19でしたっけ
17、18です。17 and 18, right? Is what we've got. So sake 3 and sake 4 are from the same series, but just the vintage is different. So number 3 is vintage 17, and number 4 is vintage 18.
皆さん、古国の意味はご存知ですかね
Why is it so different?
Thank you.
Yes. Because of everything. I don't know. Maybe you're like me, a tad hungover, and the salt is really nice. That's part of it. Yeah, kokoku, can you explain the name?
説明僕したらいいですか
はい。
古国っていうのは、お酒ってこう熟成するとちょっとこう、茶色紅白色になっていくと思うんですけども、古国っていうのは紅白色になっていくように時を刻んでいく。ちょっと漢字の説明なんで難しいかもしれないですけど、っていう意味で、古国と名付けてます。で、滋賀県のことを別名、湖の国って書いて古国って呼ぶんですね。この僕たち古国の人間がみたいなことを言ったりする。それを地元に特化した日本で一番大きい湖を抱えているこの土地っていうことをしっかり表現していくお酒を作りたいっていう意味でこうダブルミーニングでつけてます。
Okay, I didn't know this double meaning. So kokoku, the characters, the first ko is for like amber, so the color that the sake becomes as it's aged. I mean, these sakes don't actually become like amber necessarily, but as sake ages, usually takes on some color. And the koku character means to carve in time. So which, if you look at the label, it shows these like slashes or gashes, right? And so the first character, the first 2 is like 2 and then 10. With the cross, and then all the lines, the gashes are to indicate time, right? So it's a really beautiful story, and if you've got like people born in these years, it would be fun to keep them for a while. Yeah, the 17 and 18 have like obviously 18 has one more gap line in it.
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Yeah. Yeah, and then apparently also Shiga is known as the country or the region of lakes. So Lake Biwako is the largest freshwater lake in Japan, and that's where Shiga is there, and so they call themselves like the people of the lake, and that's kokoku, right? So it's a double meaning, double play on words. Yeah. And since since 2000, since 2010, it's been Yamahai.
Yeah. で、ヴィンテージをコンセプトにしているお酒なんで、本当にその年の米と、水と、あと酵母もこれは無添加ワイドリーストを使って その年にそこにいたものっていうコンセプトで、本当に原料はもうその年の米と水と環境の、菌だけなんで、乳酸も入れないですし、酵母も入れない、もう本当にナチュラルなお酒になります。
So the sakes are made with rice, water, koji of that year, and also they are wild yeast, so they don't add cultivated yeast to these. So it's really like a capturing that time, that year when you have the rice vintage, you have the water, you have the yeast from the environment, and really nothing else. So Yamahai, no lactic acid is added. You have this natural lactic fermentation, and you've got a lot more complexity. Doesn't mean more funkiness necessarily, but you get a lot more complex lactic notes, and I think it really shows in this sake. The koji rice and the kake rice are slightly different polish. So why did you make that decision? かけと麹がの精米が違いますよね。その理由っていうのは。
説明を、はい、玉境はめちゃめちゃ硬いお米で、80% 精米、本当に一晩でも 29% ぐらいしか水を吸わないんですね。本当は35ぐらい吸わせたいんです。だから蒸し上がりが結構パラパラなんですね。でもこのパラパラだからこそさっきのこのシャープな感じ、輪郭とか作れるのが面白さではあるんですけども、ただ麹っていうのは菌がお米にこう食い込んでいかないといけない。ってなると硬いともう全然生えることができないんですね。でこれを削ってあげることによって水が吸いやすくなって蒸し上がりもっと柔らかくなって菌が入っていけるんで、麹だけは菌生やすめに削ってます。
Tamasakai, so these two rice varieties are made with Tamasakai rice, and we just finished talking about how it's a very hard rice that doesn't soak up water very easily. So at 80%, even if they soak overnight, it's only at like 29%. But their goal is probably around 35, but it won't get to that. So by lowering the polish on the koji, because koji is a fungus, it needs moisture to grow and to do its thing. So that's why the koji rice is lower at 60, and then the kake rice is at 80, so that you do have fermentation, like the enzymes working, but also the structure that Tamasakae brings when it's also not very polished. Yeah, a lot going on there. Oh, interesting. So, but this is it the 17, Nick, that you had in Japan?
13.
13. Oh yeah. We keep talking.
The 2013 at L'Effervescence in 2018, and then in the Shinkansen I had the 2015, and then we have the 16, the 17, and now the 18 in the shop. So if anyone wants a
White
vertical,
yeah,
it's the only vertical I have of sake, but it's going to be delicious.
13年目でレフェルサンスのペアリングをいただいて、新幹線では15年を飲んで、今はショップとレストランで2016、17、18あるんです。
嬉しい。ありがとうございます。
この中からココクって本当ピンポイントで言われたんでびっくりしました。I was really surprised that you're like, I want this. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, of course.
初めてワイルドイースト使った年です。
13 was the first year they used wild yeast, yeah, for this. Yeah, very cool. So with the 17 and 18, do you remember the rice and the fermentation of these years? どう違いましたね、17と18で。
そうですね、18、ちょっとね、今少し温暖化で米が硬くなってきてて、ちょっと最近ここ2、3年米が溶けにくいんですよね。17年までは比較的味も乗りやすかったんですけども、ちょっと18年以降は少し味を乗せるのにちょっと苦労している部分はあります。だから少し17年に比べてできた時の味のりがシャープだった。ただそこを熟成でカバーしていけるのがこの広告の良さなので、だいぶ今となってはそれなりに味幅も出てきて、初め絞った時少し心配した年でした、18は。
So with global warming, it's good for certain things like crops like grapes in certain ways and places. But with rice, this like extreme heat that we get in Japan now, the rice tamasaka is even harder, like even harder to get to melt and to ferment and get flavor out of. So when he first pressed the 18, he was actually kind of worried about the how much how much of expression it was going to develop. But with also age, it's kind of not covered, but like it's evolved since there too, which is the part of the fun of these sakes. Like capturing a moment or that vintage, right? Because the 18 is like sharper and cleaner. Yeah, a little more like brisk. That's a word. Yeah. I think you would go with creme brulee. Yeah, I think so. Like, how sweet maybe it would depend. どうですかクレームブルー、プリンじゃないか。クレームブルーはクレームブルーですよね。
クルブルーはクルブルーですね。クルブルーね、甘さね、今、マリオさん言ったけど、この焦がしカラメルの部分は、絶対合うと思いますね。そのクリームはちょっと甘さとか、どの程度かよるけど。
The caramel part, right? You think it would be quite good with it. The cream part, depending on the sweetness of the cream itself. But なんだっけ、卵プリンで卵豆腐、そういうのありますよね。でさったっけ卵豆腐と山ハイが美味しいってどっかで読んだような。
卵豆腐。
Yeah, I think it would be good with like egg custard, like something not that sweet, maybe even, but like a creamy eggy dish. Like I guess even like chawanmushi, but you're talking more about cream and like lactic. So yes, I do think it would be good with creme brulee, depending on.
僕はカナダの人食べるかどうかちょっとあれですけど、バンバンジー中華の
はい
ちょっとスパイシーな味噌のやつ。
バンバンジー。
食べるのかな。
英語なんだっけな。バンバンジー。And there's other Japanese people here. What is bambanji in English? Is it just like tantan? No. Bambanji, table. It's like a creamy. Google Translate just put it into the alphabet. Bambanji. Thank you. Bang Bang Chicken? Really? That's the name? Jeez. Okay. But I think it has like a creamy miso, but vinegary dressing, right? な感じですよね。バンバンジーって。
スパイシーなね、味噌。やっぱスパイシーなものとも合うかな。
バンバンチキン、nope. Definitely not. Yeah, but yeah, like something a little creamy, like peanut sauce like or sesame sauce like would be really nice, I think. Yeah. And I think the first vintages we got for Canada were, we got like one secret case of 15 and then 16, 17, 18, 19? Yeah. 15は1ケースだけなんで、とうとう隠してあります。
ありがとうございます。
We're hiding it for something special.
ちょうどここの。
For your vertical.
Yeah, totally, exactly.
この隣に絞る部屋があるんですけど、お酒を。そこに地下作ってるんですよ。僕、そのブルゴーニュで、ワインケーブで、こう、ろうそくの光で案内されて、ヴィンテージのワインとか見せられて、もうめちゃめちゃこう、感銘を受けたっていうか、で、こう、時が刻むお酒の価値っていう、僕らこう瞬間的に美味しい液体を作るっていうことももちろん大事なんですけども、やっぱお酒の楽しみって、その液体を飲むっていうだけじゃなくて、そこにの背景であったり、そこにこう時間が背景もそうですし、あとは酒造りの哲学とそういう背景もそうですけども、やっぱそういったことを思って飲むからこそやっぱ楽しいじゃないですか。なんかこうそういうどう言ったらいいかな、時間って変えるもんじゃないから、そういうこうどう言ったらいいかな、時の価値っていうか、そういうのをこう楽しむことを日本酒でもやりたいと思ったのは、そのブルゴーニュで見せてもらった時で、ここの蔵を作る時に地下を作って、今そこで2010年からちょっとこう残してある分が全部寝てるんで、いつかリリースします。だから今10歳の人はバースデーヴィンテージが飲める。
Okay. So yeah, he's building a cellar underneath the pressing room because when he went to Burgundy, and what is that candle called? The Burgundy like candle. They sell them in all the gift shops in Bone. Anyway, when he was like led around the cellars, the caves, he was really inspired by that to say like, how come with sake we only really like talk about the now or this vintage or this BY? You can't buy time, and each vintage really tells a story of the people and the rice and the environment that year. So he wants to put that value into sake as well. So he's hiding things from like 2010 onwards to eventually release again. That's probably why you said to me there's very few for Canada. But so like 10 people who are 10 years old now, eventually they can have a birthday like birth year sake. Yeah. Yeah. Or anyone born later.
だから2013年もまだちょっと寝かしてるんで、ニックさんまた2013年いつか飲んでもらえると思うね。またリリース。
13, so he says that you'll be able to drink it again.
I'll come visit.
Everyone's watching. There's 17 people here. Everyone heard that. Everyone's a witness. 証拠というか聞いちゃったんで13年絶対 Yeah, you made a promise. Yeah, but so okay, when you had the 13 in Japan, Nick, like it was paired at a very like fancy tasting menu, right? Yeah, but and I've asked you probably many times, but it was paired with a particular.
Oh, I don't remember. I'm gonna look it up. But like two Michelin star restaurant, it was fine. Like the restaurant's amazing, but what I didn't realize was I tasted that in the wines and the sakes I tasted that night included Valentini Trebbiano d'Abruzzo, included Ganavat, Misura, like the best Ganavat, and some really cool sakes that I think I've shown you over the years. But their philosophy was very low intervention style sake, and I think that's kind of we don't often talk about natural sake, but there is definitely sake producers who make in a low intervention style, whose less is more, and I think not adding yeast is a huge. I mean, that's a huge decision to make when you're making sake, and you only using local varieties from local farmers. That's definitely within the principles of low intervention. And I could see that in there. It was, and that's why it takes a little bit of time for people to understand that this isn't the sake that they have at a sushi restaurant on Bloor Street, but it is still sake, and it is still worth understanding, even if it's unfamiliar. And I really wanted the people who are watching and tasting with us to understand that as well. Like, there is a gamut and a spectrum in sake just as much there is in wine and beer and scotch and everything. You just have to open your mind to it. And this is a delight. This is a delightful evening to be able to taste some really interesting sake. And one day we'll all be in Japan and we can sail on Lake Biwa and drink.
Yeah, and drink it on the Shinkansen for sure. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. But I think it's the whole lineup, but in particular the Kokoku series is actually quite not that huge of it's actually more of a maybe jump for Japanese people, traditional sake drinkers. そうですか。このコココのヴィンテージだったり、山杯で無添加、酵母無添加っていうのはワインラバーに日本人でも外国人の方でもワインラバーにとってはそんなにギャップというか、
そうですね。
あるものではないですよね、かえって。
ワインラバーの方がやっぱ支持してくださいます。
Yeah, I think it makes it actually, like you said, it really has these philosophies and stories of it connects the wine side to it too, And I feel like with Tomita-san's personal history that really comes alive when we're talking about it.
And it's it's a high quality sake that isn't daginjo, that isn't a very common way to make expensive sake is to polish it and to make it in a very daginjo style. This is kind of completely on the other side of that flavor profile, but equally elegant, equally interesting, age-worthy. You know, these are all the hallmarks of classic wine, right? You know, the great wines of the world are unique, show a sense of place, age-worthy, that don't taste like other things, and this is what it delivers. And you know, may not, you know, I may be, you know, being a bit patronizing by saying you may not understand what you're tasting, but like even I am still still trying to understand as I taste this sake what I'm actually tasting and what I'm perceiving. And you know, I think we will look back on this time in 10, 15, 20 years and go, this was the like these were the times where, you know, sake was reinvented, you know, back when Beaujolais was just, you know, cheap nouveau style. It took, you know, some really some really iconic producers to like change the way Beaujolais was defined, and the rest is history. And I think this is kind of the time we're looking at in sake, right? Because these iconic producers making things that aren't what people expect, but in time history will prove them that this was the right thing to do.
I think all these sakes, I go back to it, and every single one makes me think, and it's like I think that's, well, for me, one of the definitions of like complexity, and you know, makes you, it's not easy, it's not obvious, but you want to keep going back to it and like smelling it and heating it and using like bigger wine glasses or fancy glasses for asthma, and you know, playing with it. You know, I think that's really what's fascinating. すぐ飲んでおいしもちろんすぐ飲んで美味しいんですけど、また戻ってまた戻って、あ、こういうふうに変わったなとか、楽しむのがすごいですよね、やっぱり。コンプレクシティというか、はい。
なんか、日本酒のどこまで熟成できるかっていうことも挑戦したいなって、本当に20年、30年寝かしていきたいと思ってるんで、だから絞った時にかなり残糖を少なく絞ってるんで、メラードがすごいゆっくりなんですね。やっぱりもう少し甘いお酒すぐ茶色くなって活変して、で、味もすぐ乗ってくるんですけども、だから今2010年とかでも全然まだまだいけるねっていう感じです。
When he presses them, they're at very low sugar levels, right? So there's very low residual sugar, which is why they age really slowly and the Maillard reaction takes so long. Whereas the sakes that have high RS sugar content, they like develop flavor quite fast, and then but they also brown and like caramelize quickly. Whereas this is like designed to be really slow and for you to be like patient, like with great wines, which is really tough, you know, in our fast-paced world. 待つのがやっぱり大変ですよね。開けて飲んでみたいって思うところが。When you switched to not adding yeast, 酵母立たないって決めたときに分からなかったこととか時間かかりました、最初。
そうですか。いや、すごくやっぱり不安ですよね。どんなものが菌が増えてくるかわからないんで、まあ、衛生環境もすごく気遣いますし、あと有料酵母ってすごい発酵力が高いんですけど、やっぱこのワイルドイーストは発酵力が弱いんで、やっぱりこの温度で発酵をサポートしてあげるとかっていうことで、なんとか形作ったっていう感じです。
When you switched to not adding cultivated yeast, it was really worried, you know, like what other things are going to come into the fermentation to spoil it. It would be the worst case scenario. But ambient yeast is a lot weaker, or is not as like it's not as like chosen. So you know, you support it with like temperature changes and like making sure the environment's clean, but also not like sterile, because then it wouldn't ferment. Yeah. Fascinating.
Any questions? What was everyone's favorite of the lineup before we close this down? Anyone? 2018. 4, 2, 3, 1. Okay.
4, 2, 3, 1. Okay. Interesting. Yeah.
4, 2, 3, 1's an interesting combo, but I appreciate that. Yeah, the 18 is pretty great. It's drinking really well, and it's nice that Tomita-san was like talked about aging his sakes, which is something that we don't often talk about or suggest to people because it goes in the face of what is common, sort of common advice is that sake should be drunk within a year. It's supposed to be done fresh. But it's a much easier, I think it's a much more interesting and it sort of resonates with wine lovers to be able to put some sake aside and to see how it develops. I think that's a nice and nice similarity to wine and these sake. So that's great.
Yeah, age slower than
information.
That's fair, yeah. I really want to try sake number 2. So the Teiseihaku Tamasake with you know those kettle chips with the black pepper kettle chips? ケトルチップスでポテトチップスなんですけど、ブラックペッパーの、味のがあるんですよね。かなりペッパー強いんですけど、それと美味しそうだな。Whatever I really like the first one. It's I find it like really elegant and expressive already. Which one did you like, Nick?
I was least familiar with the Heisahaku Tamazake, and I really enjoyed the minerality and the saltiness of it. I definitely want to put some of the kokoku in my cellar, and just pull it out every now and again. I think it's going to be a really fun journey for me.
And it's even within like a week, you know, or 2 weeks or a month, like even though it's opened. 開けても2週間、2週間、3週間で味わえますよね。
はい。
Yeah, you can really peppery chips with. Yes, thank you for supporting my potato chip addictions. Yeah. That was really fun. I think we'd go with a lot of different foods. So you're done brewing now? Are you like just working at the brewery preparing for next season, or do you go to like farms? No, 古式倒しの後は何をされてるんですか？富田さんは。
ですね。僕は結構今農家さんとこ回ったり、あとは今スタッフのトレーニングみたいなのをやったり。でスタッフは今酒粕をパッキングする。
Staff are packing sake kasu right now. Yeah, so and doing like staff training and going to the farms. Yeah.
And on the website, you sell kasu soap, so.
酒粕石鹸売ってらっしゃいますよね。
はいはいはい。めっちゃいい。
めっちゃ売れるんですか？
めっちゃいい。いいです。
Is it? That's great. Yeah, you should. Okay, well maybe I saw it and it was like quite. Yeah, it looked really nice. Maybe we can you can sneak in like a layer of soap. お酒の隣に石鹸も一緒に入れてください。Yeah. But Nick, you made amazake today, right?
Hey, amazake.
Whoa.
Did
you make?
Yes, I did. And I wanted it in preparation of me drinking potentially 4 bottles of sake in one night. I needed this as a cure for tomorrow, so it's going to be delicious. It's still warm, but it's perfect.
You use the sous vide machine, right?
Yes. And I warmed up while we were chatting. I just put this in the wataribre in the water bath to warm up to 55 degrees. So I'm about to drink that.
低温調理のあれありますよね、スビードマシン。それで温めてそうです。
すごい。麹は？麹は買ったんですか？
You didn't make the koji, right? I mean, next step.
I bought the koji. On Amazon. That's what Amazon is. Hey.
トロントも酒作ってるとこあるんで、そこから泉っていうところから麹買います。
なるほど。
Yeah, so if you want, I think wine coach next time Nick's gonna show how to make amazake. Yeah.
I'll sell it.
Yeah.
Sell it to you.
Yeah.
$20.
Other than mother's milk. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Tomita-san. Arigatou gozaimasu. And Mariko, thank you so much. I appreciate this. This was really a once in a lifetime opportunity. And
we'll say that when we go to the brewery next.
Yeah, yes. Or maybe Tomita-san can come visit Canada one day, and I was going to say we could show you Canadian wine. And that was it. That was the end of that statement.
That was yeah, when we can travel.
Between drinking lots of delicious Burgundy and champagne, we'll pepper in some Riesling and some delicious Canadian wine.
Yeah, maybe for your honeymoon, right, Tomita-san? Right?
はい。
Maybe for your honeymoon, I said. ご結婚されたんですよね。
はいはいはい。
おめでとうございます。Congratulations. I'm saying for your honeymoon, maybe Ontario should be in your list. No, I'm okay.
Well, yes, well, everyone have a lovely evening. Thank you very much. Thanks for everyone's time. Tomita-san, thank you very much. Mariko, again, thank you. We'll see everyone soon. And have a lovely evening. Tomita-san, have a lovely day. Ciao, ciao.
ありがとうございました。お願いします。